Tobin, let me ask you a question. I'll just address it to you.
All right.
This occurred to me the other day. When you take a shower, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that you get your whole body clean the whole time?
Very confident.
Very confident?
Think about
Wait a minute. Stop. Back up. So you're telling me that on a scale of 1 to 10, you'd be like 10 out of 10, that every time you take a shower, your entire body is clean.
I've never heard confidence measured in a scale of 1 to 10, but yes.
You're at 10 out of 10?
Yeah, I think about it very carefully during the shower.
I'm going to say I didn't expect that. I wish
you didn't
I could
expect
be
me
more
to
like
be
you.
that confident, or you didn't expect me to answer this way?
Chris, are you
Tobin's a very
confident too?
procedural person. Like, he's very much about process and form. I have two modes of shower. There's the, I'm going to shower and really do a good job this time. And then there's the, I just want to rinse off. And so
I don't care about getting clean. I
Yeah.
don't use soap with the rinse off.
I just need to get the sweat off my body.
That's like brushing without toothpaste.
Yeah.
It's like a 45-second to 2-minute shower. It's
Yeah,
like,
nobody can get clean that fast.
To be fair, you didn't ask how clean he gets. You asked how confident he is.
Okay, we recording?
That's fun.
we are recording.
All right, we're on with Christopher Blackburn, Jeremiah Wentz, Tobin Doobie, and Leigh Bortins. Hey, Jeremiah, I heard you had something to tell us.
I do. I mean, my kids were reading Cheaper by the Dozen, okay? And obviously they're systems engineers, efficiency experts. And they talk about the most efficient way to get clean. It goes up one arm, down the other one, okay? And I realized my parents read that book to me when I was a kid. And so I started developing this method of showering unconsciously. I'm 37 years old. And so probably 25 years now I've been showering the same way. And I'm standing in the shower, I'm coming up one arm, down the other arm, and go all the way, and I stop for a moment because I realized I don't know if my back right calf was cleaned. Like a washcloth went everywhere else, and I stopped and I thought, now wait a minute. If this is my normal habitual routine for cleaning, maybe I just haven't missed it this time. Maybe I'm always missing my back right calf.
Like if you had a major systemic flaw in the way that you take a shower.
Maybe something's wrong in my shower process.
Yeah.
And then I looked, and it's not like there's caked on dirt on my calf, right? I don't have 25 layers worth of dirt there, so obviously it's getting clean at some point, but I realized my system was off. You're like, is that...
Now, did you do like a swab off Dad's calf in a petri dish
That's right.
for your
Call my
homeschool
wife
science
and, would you get the
unit?
Q-tip over here and the microscope? No, I didn't do that. But here's where I was going with that. Leigh, we're talking about math.
It's on math today.
It's on math. And I was just thinking, I'm not a numbers guy. I've never considered myself to be a math guy, okay? My whole family is engineers. I'm like the ugly duckling. I do, communications and I talk and stuff like that, right? But it's that engineering mindset and the study of math when I was a child that made me think in terms of systems and processes.
But you don't think in terms of systems and processes very well.
Well, that's okay. That's fair.
If you've been missing a whole calf all your life.
Yeah, that's fair. I was thinking, I've never considered math a big part of my life, but when I think about what math has taught me, it goes far beyond numbers and when you get into all the letter math.
Yes.
It's about systems,
Yeah,
organization, patience, failure,
Right.
trying and over again, not understanding and being content. That's a real hard one, being content with not understanding, right?
I think that I like that observation because I think that when people feel like math is boring, it's because they either learned math in a way where they didn't get that benefit from it. Because unless you're working in rocket science or a very mathematical computer language or somehow doing mathematics as your job, the benefit that you got was thinking in terms of process and organization, having more organized thoughts. I think people either don't get that benefit or they think that maybe they do and don't realize that they learned it in math. And that's why math is kind of, I wouldn't say frowned upon, but people don't usually talk about, wow, my life was changed by learning algebra.
And yet it probably was.
It probably was. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We don't always see the benefits are sometimes the connection between the cause and effect is kind of invisible.
Yeah. I mean, think about math studies, even in an institutional system that you went to for 12 years, just the idea of every day doing something rote that comes from an organized area of thought can't help but change your brain to think in organized ways. Mm-hmm. And so even if you didn't like it, and that's unfortunate that you came out saying, well, think about what you're saying. I don't like thinking systematically. I don't like being organized. I don't like the idea of cause and effect, because that's what math teaches us. But that's not what we're told it teaches us. Right? What is it we're told it teaches us? Because you guys are very thoughtful in looking back on your education, probably more so than a lot of folks. And so what is it we're really being told about math?
I feel like we're told that even if we're not going to use math professionally, we will sometimes need to use it when we're building a flower bed or measuring
the shadows.
What?
Or like measuring the shadows off of
doing trigonometry to see how high it is. Mm-hmm.
Is that real inspiring?
Or
not
when
very.
the cat's in an elevator,
not very.
How high is the cat going to go off the ground when the elevator stops suddenly? Or
I don't think
how many bushels of apples I'm going to have when I get back from the market?
I don't think these are things that we're told we will use.
That's what I thought I learned.
Chris,
Really?
do you consider yourself a math person?
I'm a math-minded person, but I was never a math person, no.
Well, what's the difference?
I would say that I always thought very systematically, and math came very easy, but I never enjoyed it.
Oh.
To this day, too?
To this day, I wouldn't want to sit down and do algebra, no. Do I appreciate math? Yes. Do I like the system of math? Do I like the simplicity and the beauty with which math operates? Yes. I appreciate math. Still don't want to sit down and do algebra.
You know, Chris isn't alone. I saw a study in Scientific American from 2011 that talked about how 40% of Americans hate math.
I don't hate math.
I believe that's
just like
statistic,
math.
though.
But yeah.
Not a math fan.
Not a fan of going through and sitting and doing the rote procedure, no.
Do you like any other type of, knitting's the first example that came to mind. Obviously, you don't strike me as a knitter, but it's the same process over and over again. Is it because of the process, or is it because you just don't like sitting and doing something in the same place for a long time?
I think it's okay. So again, I'm not averse to math. I can sit and do math, and I can get very engaged with math if it matters. The first time I ever sat and budgeted stuff, I was like, "This is amazing. There's money, and it matters." It was very simple and easy to do. Right. And so when the math has context and meaning and value, I have no issue with the math. It was just the process seemed tedious and pointless, and it took the majority of my mornings. And
You're talking about when you were school age.
Yeah, when I was school age. And because of that, I think even now, if someone were like, hey, do some math, I'd be like, My initial reaction was,
Well, that's not my experience. You live in my house, you come downstairs, and I say, Chris, let's do some math. And you always enjoy doing it.
Because it's not rote procedure. It's I don't know. We're engaging with the math in a way that I never did as a child.
Yeah, tell me what that is, because I can only picture it as like math homework. So tell me the way you're engaging.
So we'll discuss the Christianity behind mathematics and the theology, as well as the organized manner in which it describes the world, and how when you know certain aspects of it, the aha moments are just really much more engaging when you study creation. So with writing this math curriculum, Christopher's been downstairs helping me think through what's the best process to organize it and outline it. So the big ideas and putting them into a system, you enjoy that.
And also because I think that there's the hope and promise that I'm going to make somebody else's math experience better than mine was.
Pedagogically, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a thing that I was reading because we're doing, of course, the practicum this year is about math. And I did a video got it in the end of March, our big practicum sign up month. If you haven't signed up for practicum,
it's time.
It's time. Tell your friends. But I did a topic video about math to kind of drive some excitement about what we're going to be learning about at practicum. And one of the things that I read as I was building this script is it was the criticisms that classical educators have made of modern math pedagogy. And one of the things was, like you said, the lack of context. That we're taught the process, but not necessarily what you would realistically use it for or how it is reshaping your brain. But there was another thing that was a surprise to me, that the whole system of having a child do some math and then bring it back to the teacher, and then it's either right or wrong, is not the way that math is used professionally.
And that's discouraging.
Anywhere math
that way.
Yes, it is. And anywhere so would you think, having that experience, would you think that you want to grow up and have a profession in math if that's what you think it's going to look like? When
Being
in fact,
told yes or no, you're right or wrong all day long.
Right. But math-based professions, apparently, you have are very collaborative. You do your numbers and then show it to peers who can see whether there was a flaw in your process. And then if there was, you work together on sorting it out until you've created something of value together.
So that's one of the flaws in thought I think about math studies is it's a very social activity.
Mm-hmm.
You want to brainstorm, discuss, question, and then go and do the grammar and the dialectic on your own, regather your thoughts after you've been challenged, and then be challenged again and work on that process. And because math education's done so badly, parents only know to do what happened to them. So they sat down and worked at a book. So that's what their kids are going to do, and they don't necessarily know how to engage to make it more interesting and to bring in the context. Though in saying that, you can be really super careful because for the littlest kids, they don't care about the context.
Right.
We got to always remember that the grammar is enough for them, the memory work is enough, and then let them go actually live life where math happens without talking about it. But that middle schooler, that high schooler that's saying, well, why do I have to do this? We just breed cynicism, I think, in them when we say, well, some of the things you were talking about earlier, your examples were
like knowing how to, if you're ever cutting out a costume, you're going to want to measure the interior, not volume, but the surface area of the fabric.
Yeah, in order to do it. And so, and when you're in the middle of doing working on a math problem or a math assignment, you're not thinking about that anyway. And then if you go to make a costume for Halloween, which every kid in the universe has made a costume for some reason at some time, they didn't go measure it all. They just kind of laid their arm against the fabric.
I
drew it.
I measured.
You're the measure.
Yeah. But that seems to me like the craft of sewing, which I was learning from scratch, not an application of something that I already knew.
But then there becomes an efficiency if you know the math, once you're dialectic about whatever that new thing is you're learning, right? Because now I can make 1,000 patterns or 1,000 costumes if I want to.
And by the way, I was taught with some pretty good math curricula in the homeschool world. I would say I got a pretty good math education. However, it was still, I think, our whole cultural atmosphere has been so. What do we want to call this sort of bad math pedagogy? We can call it the boring pedagogy until we maybe get a better definition during this podcast. But that it's influenced so much.
Well, it's industrial.
It was hard for me to make that leap.
Yeah, it's industrial. It's the same model as all modern education is. It's can you get the answer right? Can you make the widget correct? So I can give you your pat in the back. And if it's wrong, I can't use it. So that's just how I look at it. I don't think there's anything classical or Christian about the majority of our mathematics studies and their pedagogy. Do you have in mind a better one before you describe the math curriculum I'm working on? What would you want in it?
Well, I know the math that I enjoy thinking about and that inspires me with the order and beauty of creation is to discern patterns just while I'm waiting. If I'm in a waiting room or something. Look at the tiles on the wall and wonder if you draw a line. So we have these tiles in part of my house where there's large square tiles, small square tiles, and rectangular tiles that are the long side and the short side, right? And I all the time try and trace imaginary lines through them and say if you go from this point to this point, are all the shapes cut in half? And the ones that aren't, are they cut into 1/3 and 2/3? And how do you I just kind of think playing with it, but I don't have the language to
and so
turn it into anything.
I wonder why you do that, because I do something similar too, and I've always wondered why I do what I do. I like order. And so I would do that exact same thing if that was my bathroom. Yeah. And like even looking around the room we're in now, that bothers me that we don't have the tiles 100% proportioned on the buffers there that we have on the wall. I count stoplights. I count shutters on houses. I'm constantly just seeing the numbers of things that are in front of me. And I don't know if other people, Jeremiah, do you notice how many things are hanging around you?
Okay, sort of. I kind of do a point. What's the movie with Jim Carrey? Is it 23 where he starts seeing
Yeah.
number 23, everywhere, and then just starts driving him crazy? Because I understand you can overdo it, but I've noticed that for years I count things like when you're clapping in church or at I don't know if you guys go to church where you clap, but when you're at a concert or whatever you're clapping, I count the number of times I clap. When I'm walking along, my hands I'll be like snapping my fingers, alternating the fingers. And so there's a pattern.
And you're into music, and that's how math and music relate to each other.
Well, matter of fact, Tobin and I were talking earlier about how math and music, and there may be another we're not thinking of, are universal languages. I mean, math and music, they don't change necessarily. I mean, rhythms and it just runs through everything. And numbers, they don't change no matter what language or culture you are. I mean, those principles are exactly the same. So there's a beauty that is there with that universalism of that. I think one of the things that I talked to a friend who did not like math, and we got to the point where we realized the reason he didn't like it was because it was so absolute and it was so concrete. And he's he likes to debate things. And he says, I just don't like the idea that it's so black and white and there is a pat answer and I can't argue it. He says,
but that's not true. Yeah. So he has a very childish perspective on math. I mean, he really didn't get past the grammar stage where you memorized facts. Yeah. Because as soon as you get beyond that, it's all controversy. And people don't know that.
Which infinity is bigger?
Yeah. And how many infinities are there? Right. And why can you divide by 0 in some places and other places you can't?
Yeah. So I think early on, we just have this flawed understanding of what math is, what the foundation of math is. And we're taught numbers, 2 + 2, but we don't have the history and the context of it, which, Leigh, you mentioned the Christian background and influence on math early on. Do you want to delve into that a little bit more, to what that is? Because I think that's the thing. People, all they're taught is the numbers, and they don't understand the background and the context and where it came from and how it applies to everything.
Well, just a simple story, and this is only one aspect of what I would mean. It's like Johannes Kepler when he was trying to figure out the planetary motion, the equations for how the planets moved. None of the equations that were in existence at that time modeled it perfectly, and that irritated him. And the reason it irritated him is he kept saying, our Creator's perfect. I know that this all makes sense to him, and I want to make sense of it myself. And so that's what launched him in his pursuit of finding out that they don't travel in a circle, but actually in an ellipse. And he was looking for just this idea that God communicates with us very intentionally and very purposefully, and the communication they had received so far wasn't clear. So it had to be better. And so that was what was. So sometimes this is the motivation that drives you. Then there's this other idea of Christianity that's really grounded in reality, that we actually believe one is one when we're talking about concrete items. But we also know that there's things that aren't discrete, like love or raindrops. And yet you can feel quantity and number with them. And so we're willing to apply mathematical ideas to things beyond what you can just touch, because we believe that there is something beyond what we can touch. And so I always think about people who don't believe in, whether it's even just basically heaven, but the Lord and Savior and God as our creator, how stifled their imagination is. Because if they can't measure it with their senses, which lie to you, they don't believe it exists. And yet as Christians, we can see so much more and so much farther beyond what's in front of us.
That's good.
And so just bringing those ideas into it, as well as on a kind of a different level, this world works. And it works in a way that you can count on it. Our children like it when life's not unpredictable. They want to know what's coming next, how to please mom and dad, and what's the next thing that's happening, right? They don't want to fall down steps one way on Monday and a different way on Tuesday. You can't learn to balance yourself, right? The laws and all that matter. And so we as Christians expect there to be laws and to be order. And so therefore, as we say, well, why is that law there? And what situations and what circumstances is it effective in? It then gives you a little bit more motivation to sometimes do what I would say people call science. They want to have like conceptual understanding, but that can lead to the math of why things work the way that they work. And so just really appreciating that the real world, as people call it, relates to real math, and finding just the delight in solving something. As a Christian, I just know that when I find a problem solution that I didn't understand before, or a concept, like the stuff Chris and I would talk about, and we'd understand a concept better, I just delight in the Lord so much because I feel like I'm thinking his thoughts after him when I do that instead of just my own, because my own are inaccurate and his are just so appropriate all the time. So just things like that. There's things you talked about in math class growing up, and I went to public school. I forget. You guys are all homeschooled.
Yeah.
You're a horrible group to ask.
I know Saxon wasn't that much fun.
No, but you had a mother and father who, whether you like Saxon or not, they loved you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what the context was in for your, I think, most of your education versus I just got to do this for somebody who I'm not going to see ever again, and I don't know why I'm doing it. Yeah, I didn't think about that. I can't ask you guys about your public schools experience. So what was horrible about your math experience at home? Let's talk about that so that people know they're not alone, and let's talk about maybe overcoming some of it.
I could talk about the first time that I really started to get math was probably during the Mandala Fellowship, that one year that you did it, because I actually had to stop and go back to the beginning of math and relearn the grammar. When I went through math the first time, conceptually, math always made sense. It was all about putting this box into that box and knowing they fit together. And geometrically, math just makes sense all the way through algebra. Very simple. And then you get to conceptual math later on in physics, and then calculus, and it starts to get a little harder. And then I kind of like lost my way. I wasn't grounded enough in the core elements of math to really know how to write out the larger problems. And so I had no issues with math. And then one year, probably the first, like right around the time I was doing calculus, suddenly it just came to a grinding halt. And it would take me 4 hours to do one lesson in math. And I hated everything about it. Instead of just being this thing you just kind of get through and move on with your day, it's this thing that consumes your day. And I want to do anything but look at the problems on the paper and try to make sense of them. And so we spent a year, or not, like, I don't know, it was a few months. We spent a few months working on the SAT math and really drilling like simple algebra and a little below that probably. And I really started to get a handle on math. I understood that math well enough that everything else and after that suddenly made more sense because I was actually going through the forms, and I was able to go through the forms quickly enough that it became an element of discovery and not just checking off boxes.
Something to get through. Yeah. And I'm sure sometimes it was 4 hours and sometimes it wasn't. And for homeschooling parents, completing a lesson is really the least important thing that you do with your child. Sure, every now and then they just need some discipline and they got to complete the lesson. But in general, it's more time engaged with material over a long, long period of time, over many, many years, not in single days. Nobody does things well for too many hours in any given day. And so if your child's just really struggling, there's probably, well, that's why we love grammar, dialectic, and rhetoric. They probably don't know the grammar as well as you think they do. Or they maybe have the facts memorized, but they really haven't compartmentalized the categories and the questions in their head to know how to use the information. And then there's people like I think, Chris, you were this way for quite a long time. You knew it and could say the answer, but not explain why. And so you weren't rhetorical about it. And so when all of a sudden it wasn't easy and you weren't automatically rhetorical like everything like you've been previously, this high level of frustration occurs because it was so easy for you to say the answer. And now not only can you not say the answer, you can't articulate the steps to get there. So you don't even know your own mind. And that tends to be every single one of us hit some year that's like that in math studies. It's just abstract enough that we're all not physically and mentally mature with enough preparation all at the right moment to always be good at math. We're just going to hit a wall, and that's just life. It's not bad teaching or a bad book or a parent that didn't care or a child that doesn't care. It just happens.
Well, here's what might be bad teaching or a bad book is you can hit that wall in any field.
Yes, absolutely.
So why is it such a common experience to hit it in math?
Do you want to answer that or my opinion?
Boy, your question is in essence, you're asking why does everybody eventually hit that wall?
In math.
In math?
and then they end up not liking it. Versus most people,
You're not going to hit that in geography.
Right, or they struggle
Right.
with reading, but they still get better at it.
I guess you would say because
Right.
math-
Or if they did hit it in geography, sorry, Jeremiah, it's not as common. Oh, wow, geography's hard for you? That's weird. That's going to be a conversation that you're going to have with your classmates and as you're maybe helping each other on homework. But that's if math is hard for you, that's just expected.
Yeah,
Yeah.
boy, that's a good question. Could it be because with most things, there's kind of a finite level, like there's a lower ceiling, and math just goes on and on and on. So you're eventually going to hit, a ceiling on that, right? And you say, oh, man, it's not easy anymore. I mean, geography is like, oh yeah, states and capitals got it, countries, whatever regions you can.
But then you can move into topography and fault lines and seismology.
I mean, you certainly
it doesn't
could.
really have a ceiling.
Yeah, well, that's true, but that's far beyond what is taught in schools. I mean, I saw the TED Talk too, where the guy's like, here, people say there aren't any unexplored countries anymore. That's not true. We just need to go smaller and smaller and smaller. It's still there. But so I get that, but that stuff's just not typically taught,
Is that what it is?
I think, well, that's what I would think it is. Well, but also I think there's what we all feel like we were lied to by our teachers, and they're like, well, you have to learn how to memorize it in your head because you're never going to have a calculator with you all the time, right? And then all of a sudden we have cell phones, and my teacher lied to me.
Just
What
ask
else?
Siri.
Right, just ask Siri or Wolfram Alpha or whatever. Let me just go and find all the steps to it now. But I guess that would be just because math just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, and you are taught it at a higher level than a lot of other topics.
Right. I feel like geography, it was the example you used. You reach a certain level, and everyone's like, "Yeah, they're pretty proficient in geography. You could win at Jeopardy. That's good enough."
And that's probably
what I mean?
frankly a lower level.
Well, you
than
could travel to
learning.
those places, and you could know what river you have to cross to get there. You
Right.
can
Yeah.
give
The
context.
climates and the
but-
topography.
But there's not many of us who go around and say, wow, that's a really sweet algebra problem I just drove by.
By the way, there's a parcel of land that's for sale up a little bit north of here, and it's up on one. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's 3.14 acres. And every time you drive by it, our kids are like, oh, there's the pie land.
Good
Yes,
for
it
them.
is. Yes, it is.
That makes me very happy to hear.
Yeah,
That's a good
so
story.
yeah, that's
Well,
funny.
I want to throw my 2 cents in on that from what I've been studying. So let me get some historical context. So before the compulsory education, most people learned the math they needed to learn in order to function. So farmers could do cubic spaces for fertilizer, and you knew enough recipes, and the ingredients for that. The astronomers was more for less math and more seasons, and what I'm going to do with my garden, those kind of things. So math was very practical, and you learned it because in some situations you didn't eat if you didn't know, right? You'd poison your land if you didn't know how to calculate things.
Yeah.
Well, we're past that point. And what's really funny to me is in this era of high technology and progress, our individuals' math abilities are so decreased compared to the person who lived in a pre-technological age because of just that nature of having to figure things out for themselves. So anyways, the late 1800s, more and more school systems started popping up. And then it was about the 1930s where education became compulsory across the United States. By then, it was everywhere. But it still wasn't for high school. It was only compulsory through 8th grade. And math through 8th grade studies has been going on for 2,000 years. It was part of Alexandria's Academy, Aristotle, Plato. All those guys knew how to teach math. You were teaching the math facts, basically. And then only if you really were into math did you go on and have higher education beyond that basic grammar that everybody else understood also. An abacus, your tallies on your fingers, whatever it was apparent to you, the level of math you needed. So then this thing called high school started happening. Well, by 8th grade, everybody knew math that had been known for the thousands of years. So what do you do for high school? So basically, since the 1950s, we've been trying to figure that question out. Now, I know I'm a little bit old, but if you try to put it in context, that means that for 70 years, not thousands of years, but for 70 years, we've been trying to figure out what to do with 15 to 18-year-olds when it came to math. This is a brand new question for humanity. It's never been asked before that time period. So I feel like all the educators have been in this kind of playground of trying to figure that out over the last 70 years. And when did this happen? During the industrial era, where credits and grades became important, not so much the love of education. And then, of course, just the system of putting children into buildings and programs for their entire lives. So none of that fostered the love of math education either. So I don't think we've known what we were doing. And it was in the context of an era where education just wasn't fun anyway. And so those are two of the problems I'm trying to overcome with the curriculum that I'm writing. Does that resonate at all with you? It's
That's
just new.
interesting. Well, why were later teens not taught math before?
Well, they were if they were interested in it and went on to, say, Harvard or Yale or
Okay.
accounting or bookkeeping or a business where
Oh, because at that
they were specialized at that
at
way.
that
You went
point
to
they
work.
were specializing for a profession.
Mhm.
There was no general math education for that age.
Right.
Interesting.
And so that math education that we're suggesting they study is basically algebraic with a little bit of calculus and trigonometry
yep.
thrown into it, which are very, very, very abstract topics.
Right, and you're going to need them in case you study calculus. That's the only reason I've really heard given. I enjoyed trigonometry. I really liked it. Why do you study trigonometry? It's so you can do calculus later or something. Like there was really no reason for it.
Unless you're a contractor who builds things.
Right,
Then they're
yeah,
going to use it
yeah,
all the
there you
time.
go.
But so trigonometry is probably something that young men were taught who were in construction, right? So I know my John, when he was about 12 years old, was using his trigonometry, which I
Yep.
hadn't taught him yet, to build his skateboard ramps,
yeah.
right? He had to have trig then. But unless you're going to build skate ramps, that's not a good reason either.
No.
And so we end up making cynics of our children. They don't know why we're making them do this hard thing that they don't understand and can't. Dad doesn't use it every day. We don't talk about it at dinner. Why am I learning this?
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like the criticisms that are aimed at Latin
Mhm.
are much more apt to be aimed at math, the industrial teaching of math, because Latin, there are things you can read and people you can talk to. There might not be very many of those people, and they might
Well,
only
if
be
you're
in
a
one
big
place in
reader.
Italy,
Yeah.
but they do exist.
No, but if you read any kind of level of literature, there's Latin or
Yeah,
woven in
there
it,
you
right?
go.
So that's your point.
Whereas studying arithmetic,
Mhm.
algebra, and trigonometry, I think people go through life using those less
Mhm.
than Latin students go through life using their Latin.
So, in trying to put together the curriculum, we spent about a year, me and my team of two other gals, Christy Gilpin and Courtney Sanford, just talking about really why are we going to continue doing this? Is this what we want as homeschoolers in high school? Do we want to be studying these higher level subjects? And the answer we came to was yes, but not because you can go study calculus. It was because all of us have a major interest in art. And we realized how much the three of us used math in our art creations.
That's so interesting.
And so what we did is we put together a curriculum where every unit is based around an artistic idea. And the images of classical art as well as photography and some modern art and sculptures and things, so that hopefully after 3 or 4 years of a child using our curriculum, if they say to you, and they will say this to you will not change the nature of children, why do I have to know this? You can look at them and say, have you not been looking at the art on your page? That they'll have something that they can relate it to, because that's what the math actually does. So, and the reason why I think we stumbled upon art was because mathematicians organize their thoughts. Well, there's many ways, but a primary way in K to 12 education is through dimensionality. That's where all the laws and rules help define what you can and can't do. In other words, if I was an ant who lived in a one-dimensional space, which would be a line, there's things I can't do compared to if I was a cell phone in a two-dimensional space or a human being in a three-dimensional space. And so the more we looked into this idea of dimensionality and how mathematicians organize their thoughts and how it relates to art, we also started to see more and more scriptures, because the scriptures define the real world for us, as well as the imaginary world. Well, it's not imaginary, it's the one we can't see. So our major premise for math now is the the whole point of math studies is to learn how to see the unseen. And that has a lot of different ramifications. You all know, no matter what trade you're in, the person who's just really valued is the one who you don't know why he knows what he knows or she knows, but she knows her stuff because she's developed the art. She sees what everybody else doesn't see. And so it doesn't matter what your interest is in life, mathematics should help you see the unseen. And it's the first practical way that you start to see the unseen, because even a young child can do some math in their head that they couldn't possibly count, really. They can talk about millions and trillions and billions, but they're never going to count it. And so they start to be able to see the unseen. And we just think from all the scriptures that relate to the visible versus invisible, that there's a lot behind that.
I think that's really interesting what you said there about how you appreciate art, so you're motivated to study math. I thought that was really, because a lot of times people draw those two as totally separate things. No, those are the mathletes over there. These are the artists over here. And they see them as two totally distinct, separate camps. But you're saying, no, we're questioning whether or not we have to create this math curriculum. And the answer is yes. Why? Because we absolutely love art. That's really interesting.
You can't have art without proportionality.
Oh yeah, pretty much all artists
Symmetry
operate in Euclidean space. So got to know what a line is. You have to know why the diverging lines actually matter in art. It's really interesting. I remember the first time I had a graphing calculator and I just started punching in stuff and it was graphing out shapes and it could do 3-dimensional shapes. And I was like, well, that's interesting. So I just kept adding in functions until I started to build this object in 3-dimensional space in the graphing calculator. And I would add something, and it would do some new thing to the object. Well, that's cool. Let's tweak that part of it. And I created this really long function to actually make a flower in a graphing calculator, 3-dimensional flower with the petals and everything. And I'd spent probably 4 hours playing on this graphing calculator, just tweaking functions to try and make it what I wanted to do. And I was just fascinated. I was like, okay, so all of this can be represented mathematically. And I think it was when I realized, I was like, everything on a computer is represented mathematically. The whole world can be systematized in some form. So everything that I do interacts with the logic and order of math, whether I see the numbers physically represented or I just know that they're working underlying the actual aspect of it.
Wouldn't it be better to say that math is a language that's capable of describing everything you do?
Yeah.
Or at least a huge percentage of it.
Yeah, because I feel like the word order is important, and it's something I wonder about. Because the way you said it, I think, was that everything you do and is math. But I feel like I think math is a language for describing anything that you do. You see the difference between those? It's not something I can articulate well.
I think I understand what you're saying. What I was trying to get at is that, okay, in a stationary, if you just took a snapshot, everything could be described by some giant calculus function. You could calculate the movement of the objects over time. So the whole world can be prescribed with mathematical functions, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
The follow-up to that is everything operating inside our world in some way is being worked upon by forces of nature, which can be calculated with math. The
Yes.
art you look at, you can know why something's beautiful based on the lines of symmetry, based on the golden ratio and all these different things. So everything has some sort of mathematical underpinning that people have been able to parse back out what this thing is. I was talking to somebody about, I'm trying to remember his name, Adam Scott or something, the guy that wrote Dilbert. Yeah. He defined out Scott Adams.
It's his fault.
Yeah,
having two first names.
Yeah, Scott Adams actually, he wrote the 6 Elements of Comedy.
Oh yeah.
And so he actually systematized what is comedy, how to make a good joke. You need 2 or 3 of those things, and you have a joke.
Mm-hmm.
Math can be applied to anything. You can systematize pretty much anything in the known world. So it's just a matter of realizing that the things you're doing have a logic to them. They have some sort of structure to them. And that's why they're relatable. That's why someone else can look at it and know what you've actually communicated.
You're saying just follow these steps and you can be a mathematician. Just follow these steps, you can be a comedian. Because I feel that's a little bit simplistic, right? I mean, you can follow all 6 steps and just still have terrible delivery.
Well, there's 5 elements to delivery.
5 elements plus delivery.
No, there's 6 elements of comedy and there's 5 elements of delivery.
Oh my goodness, this is complicated.
That's a good question. That's kind of what I'm what I'm dancing around too is
But you can
see where I'm
separate.
going
But
with
you can
that.
separate the art and intuition from the grammar, right? That's the whole thing about being classicalist. Is he can list off maybe the grammatical elements of something, but that doesn't mean you're gonna be any good at it if that's all you know. You still have to practice the dialectic. You still have to practice the rhetoric, and they're called arts for a reason.
That's one issue prodigies often have, is that they've become these amazing performers at such a young age, and then they don't know how to create.
Because there was
So-
all mimicry. They didn't go beyond that.
So at what point does mathematics stop? Like, wasn't in the 4th century there was that Greek sculptor who said this is the equation for the perfect male body? So at what point does math just permeate everything and everything can be reduced to an equation?
Actually, 99% of it, yes, can be.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that we're trying to do in our curriculum is show that not only can you read this equation in symbols and solve it, there's actually stories and words around it. And then all of these equations can be drawn. Most people don't know that you can draw, it's called plotting, every equation that somebody gives you, and you come up with a shape that you're used to seeing in the real world. So we're going to be making those connections for the students so that, again, it's not like they'll be all excited because they know that this math will make it so they can study calculus or that it makes it so they're better artists. It's not the whole reason for any of it. It's just saying, oh, I can see something I didn't see yesterday.
right.
That should be enough for all of us that are interested in our imagination and creative side. And so that's the thing that we're drawing through the math curriculum is what do you know this week that you didn't know last week? And let's honor that.
I'm picturing Bill Murray and What About Bob, right? Baby steps, baby
Baby-
steps,
yeah.
baby steps, baby steps to the door, baby steps to the car.
So, and then we tend to, what we're referring to earlier is we tend to ask students to do too much at the wrong time instead of giving them the grace to say, all right, this is the time where you're really struggling. I know you've been doing algebra 2 and now all of a sudden you don't understand trigonometry. Doesn't mean you're dumb. It just means that maybe you just need to jog around the house, or it might mean that you need for 3 weeks before we do math again. So we're trying to build into the curriculum this idea of, it's called the math map of where you're going so that if you need to leave the trail, you know how to get back on it. And that's one of the things that's missing in math education because of the stumbling, I think, that's been going on. I think good math educators know how to teach kindergarten through about 8th grade. But after that, it's a mystery. And part of it's a mystery because, especially in this day and age, 1/3 of us move every year. So you're not even with the same math teachers and math community and math curriculum. So, and math is abstract. It is tough. And so if you're always changing your system around and the logistics, of course you're going to be, worse at it. And then think about this. If you like reading a book or you like playing sports or you're interested in playing music, you usually can find somebody in walking distance who does that also. But if you have a question about math, you either go to this machine that I'm holding in my hand, right? Which if you're not a lover of math, you're not going to go do that very often. But you rarely can walk out your door and say to somebody, hey, can you help me with this algebra problem? So even though we've been in math education since the 1950s, all of us running through high school math, we've never, ever developed math community. And as Christians, community is super important to us, that we should be able to help each other as the body of Christ in all things that we do. And yet this state education system, this industrial education system has made it so that it is assured that all of us can't help each other and that you have to be an expert because that's where the college degree will favor you or that's where the career will favor you, not because you just want to stand outside in your parking lot and talk math with the mom down the street. You don't even think that way because, but you'll talk politics or you'll talk literature, you'll talk geography, you'll talk travel, you'll talk all that other stuff.
Well, but I think you'll talk about how bad the other political party is. I'm not sure how many people are actually capable of talking politics.
Meaning polis and supporting your city?
Meaning talking about what could we do to define our community's problems better and what should be done, talking about solutions for those problems. Yeah, I agree. But I think even the communities we do have are
lacking,
are kind of grammarian.
Mm-hmm.
Grammarian.
Yeah. They're not real thoughtful. You think that's interesting? Look at that look on your face, Jeremy.
I think you should warn me before you drop that word next time. I wasn't ready for that. Was that like 40 points in Scrabble?
That should be like it depends where you play it.
Grammarian. He's making up words over here.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we can say you talk about religion, you talk about politics. So we can say we dream of the day when they say at Thanksgiving, the three things that you don't bring up are politics, religion, and math. just don't talk about them.
Don't talk about math.
Well, it'd be wonderful if we could have more discourse about it. But it's not the only field that you can't have discourse about. We don't really have a culture of storytelling either. We like to get together and talk about movies, but I don't think it's easy in walking distance to find someone else who can have an intelligent discussion about storytelling.
Well,
So
I was
I
gonna
can because of my age, right?
Right.
The
Oh,
women,
okay,
the other
okay.
men and women my age can do that. That might have been lost since, and I'm not aware of
Like
it.
you were taught fictional
we were all-
composition in school.
Yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, no, not just that. I mean, you went home and you heard the stories about the relatives, and the neighbors told the stories about their relatives, and you had this just. I can't think of anybody I know that's my age that doesn't tell things through stories. It was what we grew up with because we didn't have TV when we were children. So we didn't get that robbed from
Yeah,
us.
there's that.
We're
I
natural.
guess I mean literature, like what speaking about the architecture of Lord of the Flies. You're not going to usually have that conversation with your neighbor, and it's
Oh, that's probably true.
it's the most
The
important.
academic side of it.
It's one of the most important novels of the 20th century. We should be talking about its structure and its elocution.
Well, and
People
that's
talk-
why there's classical conversations,
Mhm.
so that we can train our children to do that. And we've not particularly done, so it's my fault, a great job on the math side. And part of it was because for the longest time when I was trying to either find other math curriculums or write my own, I couldn't see what the missing elements were. And I just felt like I was writing another bad math curriculum. And so now I feel like, I guess it's because I'm 57 and a grandmother and have helped so many folks with math studies. I feel like I have some solutions now that didn't present themselves to me even 3 or 4 years ago.
I would not have thought that maybe that's what classical education is the ability to have a conversation about an abstract field. Because, of course, we can have conversations about, say, literature or something, because that's been part of our classical atmosphere. But yeah, the math hasn't been classicalized yet. Everybody's talking about that.
So,
Interesting.
so one of the things that we're doing to help that out is writing a curriculum so that each week during the school year, so we're still being, shaped by the society we're in here. But classical conversations communities meet 30 weeks a year. And so we have 30 lessons that we go over. And if Chris was my Challenge A director at a community and Jeremiah was a Challenge B and Tobin was a Challenge 2 director, all of you would be working on the same math that week with your students. So now not only do you have to get help, you could get help from classical conversations in the training, but you guys see each other. And you can ask questions of each other and then think about it. If all your students, so if you each have 10, say, students working together, 30 students are now all working on the same concept. And so are their siblings. And so whatever you're doing that week around mathematics will be the same, and we'll start to build community so that you will have people to ask math questions of, and you'll see their interest when you maybe aren't.
So 3 cycles, you've worked, boiled all of math down into 30 different main principles.
Yes.
And you're just cycling each one different
For
layers
13
on top
years.
of it.
Kindergartners are doing calculus.
So, see, this is the part I feel like, okay, Tobin, you talked about how we don't tell stories anymore. I feel like that connects. We do tell stories, we just don't do it well. People
Right.
tell stories all the time. It's just called gossip now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we just don't know how to tell good stories and discuss them, right? We discuss math all the time. We just don't do it well. It's cool to say, I hate math. People.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's a story.
Right.
That's-
I hate math. There's a story. You have character, whatever. So with math, I feel like we're doing it. We're just not doing it well. And so here you're saying that because I learned math on Sesame Street and 3, 2, 1 contact initially, right? And then you get Schoolhouse Rock in there. 3, it's a magic number. Yes, it is. It's magic. You guys had that one? Okay. And then Brian McKnight, it's all over music. 1, it's like a dream come true. 2, just want to be with you. You remember that? So you have all the songs
No.
and stuff that come. You don't remember that. You never went to the skating rink when you were.
I grew up with Square One TV. That was just a slight.
Was Square One? Was that the
slight age
Bloodhound
gap.
Gang? Was that who?
No, it was a PBS show. It was just like a sketch show about math.
Was that Max Headroom? Was he in Square One?
He was featured on it sometimes. Yes.
I know. Yeah, I remember that. Okay. So I feel like we learned a little bit about math. It just wasn't done really well. So you're saying what the curriculum that you feel like God's given you layers it in the classical style for 13 years, you're repeating these three main concepts just on different layers of difficulty.
There's 30 lessons.
I'm sorry, that's
three
right,
stuck
30.
in your head somewhere.
That's right.
But it's all the lessons are related to dimensionality and how mathematicians think, but it turns out it's also how all of us think.
That's exciting.
That's really cool.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Because you know why I like learning screenwriting is that it reflects the way that we all think. There's actually Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, talking about mythology, and by extension, all of literature. It actually, in its structure, reflects human cognition.
Well, that's what we're trying to do too.
Wow. Okay. I'm excited
But
about
the other
this.
thing-
Tobin's in now. Tobin wants to start at the beginning.
Right.
So, like you said, even the very young age, they're learning calculus. They just don't recognize it because it's grammar.
Yeah, they're just getting prepared. They're really getting prepared for calculus studies,
Right.
which all of math education was doing, but nobody had a map to show them how it tied together and where you were going. And so, a parent will come up to me and say, I just can't help my child with algebra. Well, that's a silly thing to say. Of course, there's something in algebra you can help your child with, but you look at it as a credit and a single book, not as a system of a lot of ideas. You're an adult. Surely there's something in there you are actually very good at and some things you're not good at, like everything else in the world. But you can't identify what those are to know how to practice for yourself, and you can't identify them for your child where they're struggling because you just don't have, it seems so random. So one of the reasons I think mathematics education is so random is the way publishers make money is by changing their textbooks. And so they probably were nice and organized and very simple, pretty uniform across the country at one point. But then the next guy said, well, we got to make more money. Let's sell a new edition. Let's move chapter 2 before chapter 1 because surely math's not orderly or connected to each other.
Oh, my goodness.
Right?
Every college student in America knows exactly what you're talking about. There goes another $1,000 for books this year.
Yeah.
And math is so organized and orderly, there's no reason for it to be that way. I remember, and this relates actually to English language, I have an aunt who was an English teacher, and her aunt was an English teacher. And decades ago, I was with them for a Thanksgiving holiday, and I was preparing the essentials of the English language guide at that point. And I said to them, do you know what? I never once learned what an object complement noun was in all my years in school. And in one voice, they both said, Warner's, page 18. In other words, there used to be an English grammar book, it's called Warner's, I have it, that every single teacher taught out of, that taught English. So they were a community of educators. They all knew what the goal was. The book series has now been rewritten, and it's all mixed up.
Interesting.
But the model that we want to go off of is scriptures. Scriptures is very organized, right? Your John 3:16 is about in the same part of your Bible as mine.
Right.
Yeah,
it
just
is.
about.
Right. I'm going to say about because I know there's so many Bible versions out
I
there
have the
now.
fake Bible. I'm like flipping through my phone.
In which you read your Bible on your phone, you lose geography. You don't really know where John 3:16 is.
That's true. Good
Right.
point.
So that's the problem with math education. It's a problem with all education. Like, think about your geography. That was a good example earlier. If you put a map on the wall, nobody switches around Africa compared to Europe. Now, it might be above or below. There's a little bit of changing you can do. But we know for it to make sense, because it does make sense. It's real. It's stationary. We all study the same system. Well, we all study the same scripture. So why are we not all studying the same math? And this is really a funny thing to be talking about, I realize, because right now we're in the era of all education being individualized. And I thought how ironic it was that this community math model of the system that we can all easily understand is being endorsed by homeschoolers, the very people who generally want individualized education. But what we realize as Christians is that there are some things that aren't individual, that are a body. They are put together by Christ, and we should study them the way that he put it together. Making up your own system is actually foolish. So there I go.
It's a lot to chew on.
It is a lot. Any comments or questions? Our time's getting near the end.
When do you anticipate this new curriculum being out, Leigh?
Well, this is, just for context, this is April 2019. We're hoping by fall of 2021, a good portion of it is out.
I think we have a lot of parents who are very interested, would be very interested in hearing more about this. And then the practicum.
Yes, talk about practicum. Go ahead. Yeah, Tobin, why don't you tell us about the video you made so people...
Oh, yeah. So this year we did, Chris put together some parent interviews for the practicum promo. People who don't know what practicum is, you see all these parents and photography of the event saying this is an encouraging, empowering, free event. So send that video. It's on Facebook. Send it to your friends as they are considering homeschooling maybe and wondering what conference to go to this summer. Then the other video that we did was about math specifically. We're hoping that that's going to inspire people.
Because math's the main topic of the practicum this summer. Yeah.
It's and we did math a few years ago, and it's cycling back around as
we
one of our big
tried every
topics.
6 years repeat.
So I did a video about math specifically to try and inspire some excitement about math itself, and I kind of did it in sort of a 3 easy hacks kind of an attitude, because people want to know a hack that gets rid of all the work. And I don't think that's an entirely wrong way to think, because if math is useless and confusing in the way that you were taught it, well, we should know, we should be attracted to the secret, the right way that solves everything. That once you know this simple tip, it simplifies everything. Well, that simple tip is knowing that math is simply numbers, operations, and laws. For the rest of your life, all that you learn about, you'll be learning things to put into those categories, but those are the categories there are. And once you know that I don't know if that's half the battle, but it might be.
I think it's a big chunk of the battle. I have no idea. I mean, it seems like with the math map, there are probably an infinite number of operations, mathematicians who get their PhDs know. But the reality is, in kindergarten through 12th grade, there's 6. And then there's 6 of them that are parenthetic, like sines and integrals, harder ones. That's it. So in our curriculum, you will only meet these 12 operations. We know there's more. But if you can't get those 12 basic ones done, why are you doing the more?
Right.
And so that's one of those hacks in my mind, is to know there's only so many laws, so many numbers, so many operations. And if you would get those, it's just this big mixing and matching, like in Essentials, where you have only so many sentences and patterns, so many endings, and so many, I'm thinking math, I can't remember the third thing. Sentence patterns, 8 parts of speech. There we go.
Yep.
It took me a minute. But once you know that, it's just a mix and matching of words.
So much easier to teach language once you know that. It's a hack.
Yeah. So if you mean hack by that, I totally agree with you. But you don't mean a hack in the sense of there's no work to ever be done, because there's only shortcuts.
Right. And that's kind of, I think that's what I don't know if our culture is actually seeking shortcuts, but I think they don't see the difference between a shortcut and a solution. Because, for example, there's a right way to cut open a pomegranate. If you're not doing it, you're cutting the pomegranate wrong and creating more work for yourself. That's not a stupid shortcut. That's understanding the nature of a pomegranate.
Right.
And that's what I'm talking about.
But cutting it the wrong way is still a solution, because
It's still, yeah. It still works.
Yeah, it still works. Yeah. And we use the word hack because you can't use the word cheat when you talk about math. That just sounds bad.
Oh, yeah. It almost is a cheat.
So these videos are on the Facebook page.
Yes.
They're short, they're fun, easily shareable.
They are.
Look at that.
They're easily shareable.
Easily shareable.
I hope they're fun.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me again today, guys. And I hope our audience got something from this idea that math can be hacked. I'll see you next month.